That was Nefarious, and I am joined by the director, Richard Rowntree. Hi, Richard. How you doing?
Hello, good. Thank you for having us.
No problem at all. Thanks for letting us screen the film. It's your second feature.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, first one was good folk horror, which is kind of the polar opposite to Nefarious in many ways.
Indeed, yeah. I watched Dogged a little while ago, and it was on Amazon Prime at the moment, isn't it? And it's
that's right. Yeah, for free.
It was good though. I enjoyed that a lot as well. So
Thank you.
Where did Nefarious come from?
So it was kind of born out of the intense filmmaking learning curve that we had with Dogged. We were told frequently by festivals with Dogged, oh, can you kind of cut 20 or 25 minutes out of it, and then we can screen it if you can cut it down to an hour and a half. And we were kind of very anti it because we felt like it wasn't fair on the people who put their time and effort into the film to just kind of completely cut a roll or something like that. And it was always envisaged to be a much slower paced movie. So what we kind of learned from that was we took the elements that people didn't like and that members on the crew didn't like shooting at 3 o'clock in the morning in a graveyard and things like that. And we were like, how can we do everything and make it as easy as possible? And the kind of idea sprung up of doing a one location movie. And so we sat down and started kind of spitballing ideas about doing a home invasion film. And then it kind of grew from there because I didn't want to do something that was just formulaic kind of home invasion. So we mixed things up a bit, but also made the whole filmmaking process a bit easier for everybody involved, I think. And it's a very small cast and everything else, but more intense in terms of the number of days we had with them and the amount of work we got to do with them. So it kind of grew out of what we'd learned from Dogged and trying to make everything easier for everybody whilst still making an entertaining movie. One of the things we got with Dogged, one of the comments we frequently got was kind of, oh, it's not really a horror movie, there's no blood and guts. And we were like, well, okay, we'll go the other way with it this time and see what we can do with that.
Cool. I love the way obviously it changes, massive tone shift halfway through, where it's kind of like documentary-ish kind of style to start with, and then when obviously the killer gets revealed, it goes full on horror.
Yeah, I mean, we one of the things I was really interested in playing with, and Matt that wrote it with me as well, were kind of this idea of having a number of very unreliable narrators in the first part of the story. So until the audience gets kind of thrown into it, which, as you say, is kind of about halfway through, you don't really know who's telling the truth or where it's coming from or what kind of ulterior motives they've got. And that's kind of why we framed it as well in the kind of almost like a stage play. It's kind of black backgrounds. You don't know what's going on. There's kind of one interview table with people either side of it. And they're all kind of telling their part of the story, because that's how stories work, right? When they get passed down, through friends or through generations or whatever, there's always something that slightly changes, and it's always to suit the narrator's complexities of personality as much as anything else. And so we wanted to do that, and then kind of cut everybody loose at this point where they kind of go into the house and just say, look, this is actually what happened, but we're not going to tell you whose point of view it's from. So
and by that point, it doesn't really matter whose point of view it is. It's
exactly, yeah, because
the place grisly mess, right? Anyway. Yeah. Were you influenced by any the other home invasion movies? Did you sort of sit down and watch everything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a kind of a subgenre that I was in love with. I had seen The Strangers when it first came out, and it kind of really, really terrified me. And I've kind of seen all the kind of classic Don't Breathe and Funny Games and kind of all these different ones that have played their part in the kind of evolution of the subgenre over the time. But I kind of delved a bit deeper and watched a few others, and what struck me was that outside of those ones that people talk about, right, they've never really been done in a particularly stylistic way. They're kind of meat and potatoes type movies, in the same way that you get slasher movies that are like that. They're kind of, here's your formulaic kind of script, and you know, this is what we're going to do with it, and it's going to satisfy a very particular audience. And so we wanted to break away with that. Chris, the cinematographer, and Lee, the editor as well, kind of wanted to extract from that as much as we could to play with the story and people's perceptions as they watched it. So yeah, I've seen a lot of them, but yeah, I'm not a massive lover of the subgenre.
Cool. And one of the things I really like, and mentioned Dogged a bit earlier, also, is the opening titles. They're both very cool opening titles, Nefarious, and I like the Dogged opening titles. I was really impressed with those when I first watched it as well. The kind of
Thank you. Yeah, I think with with Nefarious, we were kind of almost wanted to create this kind of Bond-esque, you know, kind of sequence as much as anything else, and that was to condense the story later on. I mean, you kind of get flashes of what's going on previously in the story. You know, you've got the prostitute kind of getting made up and ended up being killed, and bits and pieces. You know, you kind of set the tone with the establishing shots of the kind of estate where the main characters live, and so on and so forth. And we wanted to incorporate all that in there rather than have you know, a number of scenes at the beginning where we've got to try and explain something about characters and environments that don't naturally feel like they need introducing beyond, you know, these kind of quick flashes here and there. And we were very lucky working with our composer for both movies, actually, James Griffiths, and then Stacey Deleuze, who does all the vocals on the beginning of the Nefarious movie. And they kind of created this thing that is kind of Portishead-like, but also kind of quite unique in terms of the rhythm of it and everything. I found it quite jarring the first few times I heard it, and I wasn't sure it was going to work. And Lee kind of sat down and cut some bits and pieces to the music, and yeah, it kind of developed from there. So yeah,
it's a very cool score. Both have got very cool scores, and the artwork as well was the next thing I was going to say. Is the artwork for both films. The Dogged, I keep talking about Dogged more than Nefarious.
Yeah,
but, the Dogged artwork is brilliant, and Nefarious is such a cool poster with the, you know, the image in the middle.
Yes. So Chris Barnes, who used to run the Slaughtered Bird, is a very talented poster artist, and he runs Brutal Posters. And he's been doing a lot of big gigs, and I've known him for a number of years. And he kind of offered to come up with something for Nefarious, and I was kind of blown away with it when I saw it. It was kind of really fitted the tone of the movie as much as anything else. And it's one of those posters, right, or DVD covers that's a distributor's dream. They love it. It's like you've got a masked villain, you've got all the characters in there, you've got a full moon, everything else. It kind of ticks all the boxes. Whereas with Dogged, the original artwork that we had was very beautiful and really nice. And I would have chosen it had I have had the choice, but our distributors kind of wanted something that was a bit more on the money for the kind of, you know, the traditional physical media buying audience, which is kind of boys aged 14 to 20 or whatever. So. Just like you and I, Andy.
Exactly, that's it. That's what it's all about. One of the things I'm really going to mess up is seeing the audience reaction. Nefarious has played at a few festivals, obviously, before our friend COVID kicked in. How did it go down? What was the response like?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we only enter festivals where we kind of think that we can get something out of it in terms of building an audience and meeting, you know, the festival organizers and so on and so forth. And so we try and go to as many of them as we can. And really, with both films, they're kind of tailor-made for festival audiences, you know, more than they are perhaps, you know, kind of commercial audiences. And there's always interesting comments. I had when we had the premiere of Nefarious at the Buffalo Dreams Film Festival in New York, and I went over there. We happened to be on holiday in the States at the time, so I managed to go over there, and I met one of the audience members who'd seen Dogged there a couple of years before, and she explained to me how frustrated she was with the ending of Dogged because nothing's explained, and you know, she kind of really wanted me to tell her what was going on. Yeah. And I was like, well, you know, okay, I'm sorry, but, you know, I kind of like the open-ended ones. And then we sat down and screened the movie, and they did a Q&A and got me up the front afterwards. And this lady put her hand up. She was like really eager to ask a question. And Greg, the compere, asked her. He was like the first one, like, what's your question? And she was like, why have you fucking done it again? She's like, I can't, you've done another open-ended ending and I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from it and so on. So, yeah, no, it's been really good. And I love that kind of interaction that you can get with an audience. So yeah, anybody who's online who wants to ask me any questions after seeing it here, feel free to get in touch.
Brilliant. We'll pass that on. What is it with taxi drivers? Do you have a you know, is that a job you wanted? That is it a fantasy of yours or?
Yeah, it's what I aspire to. No, it was kind of, it started off as a bit of a joke, right? So we financed both of our movies with crowdfunding on Kickstarter. And the first time we did it, one of the rewards that you could pick was to have your name in the film somewhere. And we kind of offered that up without having previously written anything in, but we did have this scene with this taxi driver at the beginning. And so this guy, who's actually a producer who lives out in the States now, he's called Justin Hine, put some money in and he chose that reward. And so we were like, oh, right, where are we going to do it? Well, let's have a close up on the taxi driver's kind of Hackney carriage license. And then it kind of grew from there. Like it was kind of like I'd agreed to drive the car, but the taxi driver didn't really have any interaction. So you were just going to see the back of my head or whatever. And it kind of grew from there. And then so for the second one, the guys were like, you know what would be really funny? You got to do like a Hitchcock cameo now as a taxi driver in all your movies. So now I'm desperately trying to write the next one without any sort of vehicles in it.
You can't there. Yeah.
Maybe I could be an Uber Eats delivery driver or something in the next
okay, one. That's just about the same. As long as you're driving, that's the important thing.
There we go.
I was trawling IMDb yesterday and checking you out, obviously, and you seem to have worked on pretty much everything.
I've worked on a lot of movies, yeah. Yeah. So I've kind of had a very long and very varied career. So this lasted about 20 years so far. So I started off in post-production, and I was lucky enough to work on things like 28 Days Later and The Descent and things like that really early in my career before I kind of realized that these were like outstanding movies to actually be involved with, right? It just kind of was like, oh, I was getting on with it or whatever.
And then some cave film, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, oh, well, whatever. It's like this little £1 million film with somebody called Cillian Murphy in it, and you know he was kind of unknown at the time, and so it was like zombies, all right, whatever. But then it kind of I worked in post production for 2 or 3 years, and then decided production was really kind of what I wanted to do, and went off and worked on loads of kind of independent dramas, which kind of even back then didn't really have an audience. They're a really tough sell for sales companies. So a bunch of them never even ended up getting released. But I did end up meeting and working with some really well-respected actors, and that kind of gave me the impetus to realize, look, people will come and do these movies because they believe in them, whether there's an audience for them or not. And then I was kind of living in LA at the time and traveling all over, which was really good fun. And then we decided to start a family, and I was like, I can't, I've got to be back home now. So came back home, and my mum had actually been a florist and worked in the film industry. And so I kind of followed her footsteps with that regard and ended up as a greensman. So I kind of designing and building natural landscapes for film and TV, and do everything from kind of Argos Christmas commercials up to kind of June and Star Wars movies. And
that's the one that I saw yesterday. I was like, June? What? I mean, how do you feel going from something like June? I mean, obviously you're just a small part of June, but how does it go? How does it feel going from something like that to actually being in charge of your own film like Nefarious?
It's a funny one, actually. June was kind of very atypical of the very big budget movies that I work on, because the whole crew work in a kind of almost a very independent filmmaking kind of way. It's like they have their setups for the day, but then they'll be like, oh, let's just go off here and go and shoot this for a minute, and everybody kind of goes, okay, and they all go and do it, and there's very much kind of a family feeling there, and a kind of a DIY feeling almost to the way they shot it. Not to say it wasn't properly planned or anything, but they would go off and try things and get something different that wasn't kind of scheduled for that day. that was a really nice experience, because you know, very often when you work on these very big budget movies, it's like, here's our shot, this is the previs, it has to be exactly like this, and that's the end of it. And you know, that's kind of no fun for anyone, because filmmaking is an art form, right? So you want to be able to try out new things and just play around on the day. As fun, it's fun as much as anything else. And so yeah, that was actually a really nice big budget movie to work on for that very reason. Yeah.
Brilliant. What's next for you? What's next on the cards for directing?
So we've almost finished the script at the moment, which is again kind of something that we've done to try and really challenge ourselves. So we're doing a supernatural slasher movie,
right?
Which is, yeah, again kind of a real departure for us, and something that we want to do, because we want to be able to see, in the same way with the home invasion movie with Nefarious, like if we can bring something new to it and make it exciting and unpredictable and tell the story in a slightly different way. And so yeah, we did Misconception, the short that you're showing as well. We did that just before lockdown, so that's kind of been doing the rounds as well. And yeah, so hopefully as soon as the COVID situation dies down and independent films are able to come back, yeah. Because, you know, obviously, you know, it's prohibitive at the moment. You know, the idea of having a COVID supervisor earning £425 a day on a set where the whole movie is costing you 25,000 is just, it's, you know, it's not realistic. So we're gonna have to wait until a few things kick in with that. But yeah, hopefully we'll be looking at doing that, you know, late spring if all's well.
Brilliant. Well, Richard, thanks for letting us screen the film. Hopefully everyone out there enjoyed it. And thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having us.
Cheers.
Cool.